Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 245, and give you a little hopium update and a little more lighthearted story from my past. But anyway, got back from school, and the news is pretty dreary. Among the new picks for the Trump administration is Marco Rubio. It's a war hawk. There are other names which I'm less familiar with, but many say that they're not that much different than Haley and Pompeo. So, what's going on? But I have to say that until the Donald comes out and says it, as formally announced, I'm just going to hold on to a little bit of hope. Sort of like the way people were thinking his VP pick would be Rubio, and it turned out to be JD Vance, was kind of surprised, right? So maybe it's a strategy of keeping your enemies guessing. That's what I would do. Let them think that it's going to be so and so. In reality, it's going to be someone very, very different. I mean, if you were his enemy and you knew that he was going to shut you out, shut you down, then you would start to mobilize to try to block or impede or otherwise screw up their ability to get anything done. That's just my feeling. That's what I've been secretly thinking throughout the end, like the last month or two of the Trump campaign. And I don't know. I call me an optimist, hope springs eternal, whatever. But that's kind of my disposition, that I'm always looking for a brighter side, right? Something that, you know, makes it not completely bad. I don't know. I guess I'm really bad at it because I'll still hope even when there's no reason to hope at all. But anyway, my wife says that Charlie Kirk is leaking all this information, so it's probably true. But in my head, I'm thinking, would he betray so many so soon? He's not even in the office yet, but he's putting neocons in his administration, the very people who screwed him up the first time. It's a little frustrating, and a little clarity would be nice, just in time for Christmas. But if he does go that route where he will support and back Israel all the way, which will, of course, lead to a much bigger war because, what they're doing over there is insane. So if that's the route they're going to take, then it seems that the financial crisis is going to rear its ugly head. And I'm sure all of you know that most of the US treasuries are underwater, right? So after having interest rates so low for so long, and then all of a sudden raising it to 5%, it means that all of the other treasuries that were like 1% or 0.5%, their value goes down tremendously because why would you hold on to them when there is a much higher yielding treasury out there? And so people are going to dump them in exchange for, uh, you know, this higher interest yielding treasury, right? Because if you think about, I guess the word is arbitrage, right? The difference, right, of holding on to the very end after 30 years, this treasury versus, taking your losses, but then getting a 5% for 30 years, why wouldn't you do that? And so a lot of people were, dumping which means that all those financial institutions that bought them, that were obligated to buy them when they were very low in terms of interest, yeah, they're in trouble. So there's a lot of ins and outs, there's a lot of subtlety, whatever, but the big picture is basically a lot of people are holding on to these treasuries and they are not worth that much. They were told that these are AAA rated, super secure, you can trust the US government. But in reality, the ratings of those treasuries have been going down. And I remember, I don't know, it was years ago when it was clear, probably around 2008, when clearly the US was just going to simply print to oblivion They kept rating them AAA. And then there was one company, Moody's, that downgraded them. I think it was during the Obama administration. And so Obama went after them, right? Just kind of scolding them. Why did you do that? Right? We have a narrative here. You got to keep up the appearances, right? And so uh, no one else downgraded the status of the treasuries, right? Because of the intimidation from the government. So anyway, that's a downer, right? If that is the route that we're going to go, and obviously it would have been very, very difficult to slash $2 trillion out of the budget, have Elon Musk just take the trash out. But, it was fun thinking about it. So that's a downer, you know, uh, because I mean, if you think about it, it's not just people in the United States, but it's all of Europe, right? What if the United States pulls out of NATO, starts getting its house in order, is not going to send any more money to Europe, to Ukraine, to Israel, then basically the entire world is lined up against you, right? It's old school thinking, archaic thinking, but there it is. It also tells you just how many pies that the United States had their fingers in, right? It just they all come out of the woodwork when they realize that the money train might stop running. So anyway, that's a downer. So I'm just going to end this episode by talking about a story, which always makes me smile. And when I was in the last, I guess, I don't know, 6 or 10 years of teaching at the university, it gave me a lot of classroom cred with the students that I did teach and shared this story with, right? Anyway, with whom I shared this story. So I used to be one of the faculty of the honors program, and in our university, when I was in that program, students would be offered to join the honors program if their GPA, high school GPA, was really, really high. And also their SAT score had to be a certain minimum. So I always thought that was kind of funny because my GPA and SAT, well, my SAT score was fairly high. It was after the first time they revised it, but before they revised it a second and third time, making it a lot easier. But anyway, uh, so it's kind of a bragging rights thing. Like if you got to be an honors program faculty, it was a bragging rights thing. There was no extra pay or anything like that. It was just simply bragging rights. And part of it also was that their sections were a little bit smaller, so fewer papers to grade, yay, but not smaller by that much, by maybe by 5 students, by 7 students, really not that much. So it was more about, hey, I'm an honors program faculty. But what I didn't know was that the school started pressuring faculty to make their classes an easy A. And, I never did that. You got to work for your grade, just like it was when I was an undergrad, right? But there were a lot of students who were really offended by having to work in that class. And I just couldn't understand. I still don't understand it. But anyway, teaching there made me, taught me a lot of other things about how things work at the university, right? So anyway, as I said, to get into the program, it was all GPA, SAT. And what I realized was that because of that, a lot of the students that were in the program, they would structure their studying to do just that, GPA, right? It's all about the GPA. And then if they're going to go to law school, then it's LSATs, MCATs if you're going to med school, et cetera, et cetera. And so they were all planning their futures. And so they were mapping out what they needed to do, how much time they're going to allocate for this class, for that class, right? Because it's all about the GPA. It's not about learning. It's about crunching the numbers, realizing where you need to allocate your time so you get the highest possible GPA, right? And so it's just like in high school, how do you get a higher SAT score, right? You study to the test, right? You take those extra classes over the summer. Personally, I found that every single time I took the SAT, my score would get higher. And so I think I right there's the PSAT and then I took the SAT twice and each of those three times my score would get higher, right? And then I just stopped taking it. So basically, these guys were people who, students in the honors program, they would read the syllabus, figure out what weighs more, which requirements had the most value, and then they would focus on that. And then make sure they passed everything else, and that would ensure that they would get an A, with thereby preserving their GPA, etc. So learning and thinking was really not part of the expectation, right? So you're, oh, it's that same kind of class, you just go, you tell the teacher that you love them and you repeat whatever they say and you get your easy A, right? But that's not how I teach, right? It's about thinking and challenging and just breaking down and destroying everything that they believe was true so that they can think of better things, right? So the attitude of honor students, of course, and I'm very familiar with this, right? Because I was like this kind of in high school, right? I'm an honors class, I'm better than you non-honors students, right? And so that was the attitude that you see in college as well, right? So, hey, I'm an honors student. I remember one of my professors, he said that he loved teaching in honors because it gave you the feeling that you were teaching at a top tier college, right? So it's the creme de la creme, as they say, the top of the top, the best of the best. And so they are actually pretty smart. And so that had really high expectations when I went there. But of course, I'm teaching in the honors program much, much later than him. And so the attitudes of society have changed. And so they had a very superior attitude. In fact, even towards their professors, right? Like, hey, I'm in honors, you're only the faculty. I'm better than you. I know more than you, right? They have this attitude. Uh, so we were in class, and I was trying to teach them the benefits of freedom and having fewer rules in society. And so the story I told was this. Let's say you're on a dark highway, a two-lane road, one lane going this way, the other lane coming towards you, right? Sorry, it's two lane, one lane for each direction. Uh, and then you're driving, it's the middle of the night, it's a dark road. All of a sudden you see two headlights coming towards, right, headlights coming towards you, right? And so as you get closer and closer, you safely pass each other. And I asked the class, and I was like, how did you safely pass the other car? I mean, does anyone ever say, I've never been in a head-on collision at night going 50 miles an hour and the other person going 50, and so we can crash as if we're going 100 miles an hour. That would be something interesting to experience. Let's go for it, right? Would anyone say that? And everyone kind of laughs and chuckles and says, no, no, I wouldn't do that. And I said, okay, then why not? Why wouldn't you do that? And so the answer I got, this is the last honor section that I taught, right? And I think that it's because of this story or this little thought experiment and a couple others like it, right? It was just so outrageous, right? So, so I said, why don't you just try to have a head-on collision? And they're like, because of the double yellow line, right? It was like the smuggest answer you could possibly imagine. It's like, because there's a double yellow line, you're not allowed to cross it. You have to imagine my face when I heard that. And I said, "Oh, the double yellow line is what prevents you from trying to have a head-on collision for a combined speed of 100 miles an hour, possibly be, a paraplegic for the rest of your life." No, I don't think so. I think it's because you want to go home safely, right? And so as the car is approaching, you're like, I'm going to make sure I'm awake, I'm staying in my lane, right? I don't have my high beams on to upset the other driver. And so what do you think the other driver is thinking? They're thinking the same thing, right? I want to get home safely. I don't want to hit this car. I want to make sure I'm in my lane, don't have my high beams on, right? And then you pass each other safely. People were just, a bunch of the students were just like, no, it's the double yellow. I just really could not believe that that was their response. Like it was like if I told the same story in a non-honors section, which I did all the time, they would say, "Oh yeah, it's not so much the double yellow, it's you want to get home safely." In fact, most people in any given situation, what you're doing is thinking that you want to get home safely. You want to get through the day and be safe, right? But all this other stuff is just sort of try to make sure that other people who may not have studied their driver's handbook very well, you know, that there is some kind of reinforcement or some kind of penalty that if you don't observe these rules. But if it's in the middle of the night, there's no one there to prevent you if you wanted to do it. So what is it? It's the desire or that self-preservation instinct, right? That's what I was trying to get them to realize that people are going to make choices that are beneficial for them personally. And if we all do that all of the time, then society itself kind of becomes a better place, right? And we get to exchange ideas. Well, this worked out better for me. That worked out better for you. I'll give that a try. And so laws like patent laws, copyright laws, intellectual property regulations. Yeah, these are all unnecessary. In fact, we should probably not have them. And oh my gosh, then it was all over again. People were just going crazy. And the reason was because there were musicians in the crowd, right? And they were planning on they were hoping that they would write this incredible song and be able to make money from that one hit wonder for the rest of their lives, or invent something and then sit on it and then force everyone to pay them royalties for the rest of their lives. That's what they were planning. In other words, they were planning on living their lives according to the rules, the same rules which got them into the honors program, which will get them into law school, which then make them successful in life, right? We talked about drug testing too, like the FDA and how they killed more people than saved. And I had this one student who had a friend who died of cancer, and she couldn't, because there was no way to treat it. And there were a bunch of experimental drugs, but she wasn't allowed to try it because, it'd mess up the trial results and maybe mess up the FDA approval of the drug. And so she said, I kid you not, she said she sacrificed her life so that people in the future could have access to better drugs. And I was like, I understand how you feel. I know that, I was very sympathetic, which I don't have time to go into here, but I was very sympathetic. And I put on my pastoral cap on and I said, yes, I realize that's what you know, believe. And especially you need to believe that to be able to move on, get on with your life. But the reality is that that's not true, right? That potentially there were ways of probably treating, but they're not funded. No one was willing to do the testing. You make more money by treating, not curing, et cetera, et cetera. All of the other arguments that you would normally see. And then I even shared the cancer. I think I did this early on. One of the earlier episodes, I talked about oh, forgetting the drug's name, but where you just pop a pill and basically it cures lung cancer, right? So that kind of thing. And oh, she was so angry with me, right? She just wouldn't speak to me for like a couple of weeks. And then she came around. And I have a suspicion that at the end of the semester, she actually agreed with a lot of the things that it was saying. And she realized that maybe her friend didn't need to die, or maybe the excuse they gave her for not allowing her to test some of these experimental drugs, was, it didn't have to happen that way. And of course, we know that there's a regular, I don't know if it was repealed, the right to try drugs that are under testing, but you can try it out if you want, and it won't affect the test results that will be forwarded to the FDA. Now, keeping in mind that it's always about opening up the perspective to allow for more ideas and more creativity to enter into the picture to come up with better solutions. That's what I would always try to teach. And so I had this one student who kept insisting, no, 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 the government said this, and so this is what's true. And he started making up things. So I called him on it, and he complained, and that's how I got the boot, right? So I was so controversial in pushing the envelope of um, what people should believe and what they shouldn't, and what might be true, what might not be true, what might be told to them simply because it benefits someone else. So why not be more creative with your ideas? Now, I would tell my Gen Pop students, my general population students, the non-honor students, and they would always get a laugh because they know a lot of honor students. Some of their friends are honors program students, and they know exactly that attitude, right? So the non-honor students are less obsessed about grades. They're more open to creativity and learning. And I would tell them, look, those honor students, they are preparing to control your life because you are not smart enough to be able to make the decisions that you need to make in life. And so they're going to make them for you. So I say that you have to be prepared or start having conversations with those honor students to make them less of a threat, to make them realize that their desire to control other students is just simply arrogance. And that's an impossible goal, right? To convince someone who's arrogant that they are arrogant generally doesn't go well. So I say you have to innovate. You have to make them irrelevant, right? And that's our task, right? To somehow keep society changing and improving to prevent those holier than thous, those former honors program students from controlling your life through the tools of the state. Example, podcasting, Twitter, now called X, right? Who would have thought that just Elon Musk buying that one social media platform changed so much, right? I'd say that a lot. I get my news faster from X, and it's not all reliable, obviously, but it's a place where everyone gets to say whatever it is that they want, more or less, right? A lot better than it was before, right? No one's censoring you, no one's deplatforming you, right? So who would have thought that podcasting by independent journalists or even people who just want to talk about stuff that they would be so influential? I mean, right, Donald Trump went on all those podcasts, was hitting the young demographic, laughing, telling jokes, having coarse conversations. I mean, who would have thought they would be so influential? And so, on the one hand, it's very easy to get discouraged because the people in power, they do the things that they do. So, why not exploit any and every opportunity or hope that might lead to the next great thing? And this is why freedom is so important for each of us. When other people do things that we don't really like or agree or disagree with, we still have the freedom to be able to do what we want to do, stay free and be happy. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.